why am I in this room? Well, my career has been built in no small part on the back of NIH funding. I love the research I do, and I've been fortunate enough to get funding to support that research. And so as a consequence, the NIH draws on people previously funded PIs to do a lot of the reviewing for them. It's considered a service. They do pay you a little bit, but it's not very much in comparison to the amount of time you put into reviewing. And so I do a lot of this. I do a lot of reviewing, partly because I feel like I've got to support this wonderful organization. So in terms of my experience, I'm a standing member of NIH's CLHP study section, which is the community level health promotion section, which by the way has a lot by way of communication in it, a lot in the area of education, obesity, drug abuse issues, nutrition, all kinds of proposals come to this study section. We review primarily standard research proposals, R01s, R21s, and R03s. But sometimes the occasional other, mechanism comes into our study section as well. I can give you a few more details on this. I am sworn not to give you details about what goes on in the meeting, in any specific meeting per se. But I can talk about this in generalities based on what I've seen the NIH talk about. I'm also an ad hoc reviewer for other NIH mechanisms. I review conference grant proposals, small business innovation research proposals. In fact, a meeting just ended at 2:30 and I ran from the meeting to the library. This was an SDR, SDTR panel, and other mechanisms. So I've reviewed K and other awards as well. And I was just filling out my review form for my college, for James Madison College, a few days ago. And we were asked to talk about what we've done by way of the profession, etc. And I counted I've been on about a dozen different panels in 2014. I've been on one so far this year, and by the time the spring semester ends, I'll have reviewed for 4 different panels. Okay. For most of these panels, it's just 2 or 3 proposals, so it's not a big drawn time. When you're a standing study section member, you get 9 to 10 proposals 3 times a year to review. And then you have to be in reviews for 50, 60, 70, whatever it is. Okay. So what are the objectives of this presentation? They are to introduce the NIH from the perspective of a non-medical grantee. I'm going to fast forward because most of you, I think, probably know what the NIH is about. If I'm going too fast, raise your hand and I'll slow down. Okay? To demonstrate some of the opportunities available to non-medical researchers, and then to provide you with a few tips on how to be successful in NIH competitions. Okay? I'm going to try and do this quickly so we can customize the presentation to your specific needs. All right. So here's the main takeaway. Okay? For those of you who are thinking about whether what you do can be funded by the NIH, the answer is very probably yes. Okay? If you can connect your research with health, and I'm convinced that everybody in this room can do it, okay, there's a good chance that the NIH can and will fund your work if you write a good proposal. Okay? So the NIH is large and diverse. It has an enormous budget. It's probably the single largest funder of research in the world. It has a budget of about $30 billion. Okay? One of the reasons it's very attractive to universities like ours, it provides full overhead. So for every dollar that you get to run your project, the NIH will give about 50 cents to the institution, to the awardee institution. And the logic is, you've got facilities, you've got electricity bills to pay and so on. Here's some additional money to keep the organization going. Okay? It's very diverse. And basically, if it can affect human health, chances are the NIH does it. Right? So if you can if it's education, you can think about how to educate people about health. You can think about running health interventions through schools, a whole bunch of different things. You can probably do an NIH proposal that's heavily education oriented. Okay? Nutrition, economics, psychology, chemistry, toxicology, entomology, education, music, alternative medicine, pretty much any of these subjects. I've seen proposals that touch on aspects of all of these subjects. Okay? And if you go onto the NIH, they have a database where you can actually search abstracts going back dozens of years. Type in keywords like music, you'll see a whole bunch of proposals that have been funded for something like this. Okay? The key thing is the music has been tied to some kind of health outcome. And so it's been funded. Okay? So there's plenty of room for social scientists, natural scientists other than medical scientists, and even humanists. If you're in the humanities, you can tie what you do to health, you have a shot at NIH funding. Okay? So anybody who has good ideas that can advance knowledge about human health is eligible for NIH funding. Okay? One of the reasons I really like the NIH is having been part of this review process. It's really an amazing review process. It's systematic and it's highly meritocratic. There'll always be little aberrations here and there. Every now and then a proposal that's deserving may not get funded and one that's not deserving may get funded. But in my experience, it's very rare. The process is very well thought out. It's very thorough. And I think the good ideas, if you're persistent, end up getting funded at the end of the day. Okay? So the process is thorough, the results of decades of experience in modification, good innovative ideas that are well presented tend to make it through review. Okay? And the other thing I really like about the NIH is the what tends to be more important than the who. Certainly in comparison with other funding agencies with which I've had experience. Okay? It's, if you have a good record of doing work, it doesn't matter whether you're a Nobel Prize quality person or a regular researcher who does good, solid research, right? That doesn't play as much of a role as it might with a lot of other funding agencies. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the review process. It's a two-tier review process. The first step is scientific review. If you submit a proposal to the NIH, it will be reviewed by a peer group. Okay, so that's where people like us come in. Okay, people like us will be invited to be reviewers. We look at proposals. We take a look at it on the basis purely of scientific merit. We are asked to specifically not mention the word funding when we do our reviews. Okay, it's purely about, is this a well-designed project? Okay, and I'll explain to you what well-designed means in just a moment by the NIH's merit. Okay, so we look at these proposals for scientific merit. We get an evaluation form that we have to fill out for each proposal we review. Each of you should have a copy. I'm actually going to go over this in some detail at the end of the presentation. Okay, and perhaps with specific reference to some of your interests. Okay, so on the basis of this, after scientific review, proposals are assigned a score, and then they're percentile. They're thrown into a distribution of proposals, all of which received scores in the past 2 or 3 years. They have a whole distribution. They put you in that distribution, your score. They figure out the percentile. Are you in the 5th percentile or the 98th percentile, right? Where the low number is considered to be better for the NIH, right? And then on the basis of that, they'll make a decision, all right? And the decision will usually be, should we move this forward with a recommendation that it be considered for funding, or should we basically send it back to the proposal writer saying, not going to happen, okay? So if you make it through scientific review, if your proposal gets a good scientific merit score, what we call an overall impact score, then it's forwarded to the second level of review, which is council review. Okay? And council review is where the funding decision is made. Okay? Now let me draw a distinction between these two, because there's another very important institutional aspect of this that you need to understand. Scientific review goes through a particular unit within the NIH. It's called the Center for Scientific Review. Okay? The Center for Scientific Review is a cross-NIH body. Okay? They take in proposals that are aimed at any one of the multitude of institutes that comprise the NIH. Are you familiar with the structure of the NIH, the different institutes? Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the structure. Some of you are and some of you are not. The NIH consists of multiple institutes. Okay? And the different institutes usually focus on particular systems of the body or particular types of diseases or disease categories. Okay? So there's a National Heart, Lung and Blood Institute, and you can guess what that focuses on. There's a National Cancer Institute. There's a National Institute on Drug Abuse. There's a National Eye Institute. There's a National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine. Right? So these are all, and there's a whole variety of institutions like this. So those are the ones that actually have the money and make the funding decisions. And they have councils that will look at all the proposals that come in from the Center for Scientific Review and say these are the ones that we want to fund. Okay? So the institutes are the ones that control the funding and do the council review. But prior to getting to council review, your proposal is reviewed by a group of peers. And we're a pretty mixed bunch of people. Right? There'll be 20 to 30 reviewers on any given study section, and we'll come from all walks of life. There'll be an economist and a statistician and a psychologist and a psychiatrist and maybe somebody else. Okay? So the first stage you go through is independent of the funding agencies themselves. Okay? It's scientific review, it's people from the outside that the NIH draws in, You assign people to review proposals, people look at them and say, good, maybe not so good, really bad, right? Based on that, you go into council review or you don't go into council review. And then council review is what determines whether or not you get your funding. Okay, so does that give you an understanding about how the review happens? First it's scientific, and then it's funding. Scientific is everybody, funding is the institutes themselves. Alright, so let me give you some examples of what happens, and I'm going to define some of these terms a little bit later, right? But what happens during a scientific review is your proposal gets an overall impact score, right? And the impact score usually varies between 0 and 90. In theory, it can go all the way up to 90. Okay? Not 0. It's 10 and 90. Okay? So the best score that you can possibly get for a proposal is a 10. Right? The worst score that you can possibly get, and you can see how reviewers are very kind, they never award 90s, right? But you can get pretty close to a 90. Somebody got pretty close to a 90. That was not a good proposal. I've never seen something that's got this kind of score. Right? So what I want to emphasize here is your overall impact score is a score that the review panel, the scientific review panel, will assign to your proposal, right? And then based on that score, you will be given a percentile, right? And you see how the low scores, the scores that are close to 10 or between 10 and 20, are usually within the top 10% of applications, right? So they'll take the score, they'll convert it into a percentile, and it is that percentile usually that decides whether or not you're going to be funded when your proposal is forwarded to the council. Okay? And you can see that the funded proposals generally cluster, right, within the 20th percentile. They used to in 2010. It's become a little tighter since, right? And the scores are usually 30 or below. Okay? So when you're thinking about targets and where you want to be in terms of scores, this is what you want to think about. I want a score of 30 or below. I'll explain this more to you as we proceed in the presentation. Okay? So this is just to give you an illustration of how the scoring relates to the percentiling. And then what the institutes do, who have the money, right? So the NIDDK or NIDA or the Cancer Institute or whatever, is usually at the beginning of the fiscal year, they'll make some kind of formal or informal policy statement. They'll say, we intend to award all proposals that are scored within the 12th percentile, or the 13th percentile, or the 15th percentile. Okay, they'll make that statement. And that kind of information is often available on the web. Okay? So this is all useful stuff you want to look up when thinking about how to route your proposal, which institute you wanted to go through, what application you think has a high likelihood of getting funded, if you have 2 or 3 to choose from. Okay. So, but coming back to percentiling, so what will happen is the National Cancer Institute will make a statement, a policy statement, and it'll say, okay, this year, fiscal year 2015-2016, we're going to draw the line at, let's say, 12%. Okay? What that means is they intend to award most, if not all, proposals that make it within this 12th percentile. Okay? Do all proposals that make it within that percentile get funded? There's the very occasional one that will not. But that's very, very rare. You almost always get funded if you are within that pay line. Okay? If you're on the bubble, there's a little more wiggle room. Okay? So if you're on the bubble, if you're, let's say the 13th percentile and the pay line was 12, you may or may not get funded. Okay? Very often what will happen there is there will be a program officer in the institute to which you sent your application, to which your application will be assigned. Okay? That program officer will go up in that council. Remember when the funding review is being done? And they will make a case or not make a case for funding. Right? Based on all the other proposals that are there, based on the priorities of the institute for which they work. Okay? Now these are all very well qualified people. They're scientists, they're almost invariably PhDs or MDs. Right? And even in the Center for Scientific Review, which will collect your proposals and decide who's going to be on the panel and do the reviews, you're dealing with people with PhDs, usually in related fields. Okay? So this is a very high quality group of people who are running this whole operation, which I think is one of the reasons it's done in such a rigorous manner. Okay? Alright, so that's how the scoring and the percentiling works. Right? And then this is just one example from, so by the way, this graph is from the NIGMS. No, this is the NIGMS only. So this is just one institute within the NIH. Okay, don't take this as a benchmark for the entire NIH. Different institutes have different standards and scores, etc. I just wanted to use this as an illustration. So NIGMS is the National Institute for General Medical Sciences. Okay, it has a budget of, I think, somewhere between $2 and $3 billion.
So that you've got a couple of really low scores in there that weren't funded.
These two.
Yeah. What might have happened?
You know, I mean, we can speculate, right? We can speculate. Sometimes, you know, word comes down from the Congress saying, you know, this is something that, you know, we find objectionable, right? Maybe there's politics. Maybe there's something that the council sees, right, in it. You know, maybe it's so far, maybe scientifically it's a really robust proposal. But the council has its priorities, right? You know, so for example, for the National Cancer Institute in any particular year, HIV-associated cancers may be the emphasis, right? And these particular proposals are so far away from those 3 or 4 or 5 priorities that the council, that the institute has. And this, you know, this is a great proposal scientifically, but it's so far away from our priorities, we don't want to fund it. And that often filters down from, you know, some from the world of policy, politics, and so on. But it's very rare. It's very rare. The staff of the NIH generally give a lot of credence to the review process. So if you get a good percentile, it is extremely unlikely that you will not be funded. If you're the second percentile, basically you're going to get funded. All right. So this is another graph. This is also from just the NIGMS. Okay. This is to give you an idea again about how competitive the NIH is. Okay. And what I want to emphasize here is, this is the graph for 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, on the y-axis we have the percent of competing just RO1s. I'll explain what that is if somebody needs to know. Basically, it's the flagship type of research grant that you can get. Right? And what you'll see is over time, over the years, right, this graph has shifted to the left. Basically what it's saying is, you need to get a lower and lower percentile, right, in order to have a higher likelihood of getting funded. It's become more competitive. Okay? It's become more competitive not because the funding, the nominal amount of dollars to the NIH has gone down. It has not. It's increased. But it's increased very slowly relative to the rate of inflation, number one. And number two, the number of applications that are going to the NIH has more than doubled over the last 15 years. Okay? So the likelihood of getting funding has gone down. Okay. One of the really important things to understand about what the NIH funds is the emphasis on innovation. And you'll see this in the review forms that you've got. There is a separate category for innovation. Okay? Innovation is an NIH emphasis. It's one of the 5 explicit evaluation criteria. Okay? And I personally think there are lots of areas of opportunity here. Areas in which there is little research at present. And most of you, or a lot of you, probably come from disciplines where there is room to do innovative work. If you can tie what you're doing to health, given that you're obviously in non-medical fields, there's probably a lot of room to do innovative work. So for example, in computer science, probably all kinds of applications to health that people haven't begun to explore that you could steer in this direction. Okay? So one of the questions to ask yourself is, what do you do that has links to health outcomes? A lot of you have already thought about it. What do you do that medically trained professionals cannot or do not do? Right? And I'll give you my personal example as an economist, okay, who did zero health in graduate school. There are mathematical modeling methods that we use that can be applied to health and health-related research, but we learn in economics because of the kinds of data we deal with. Portfolio theory from finance, okay, where we talk about how to diversify portfolios of assets to get a steady return for those of you who might invest for retirement at some point. These are models that we use to analyze that. But the concept of diversification itself, not putting all your eggs in one basket, can very easily be applied to all kinds of health applications. And we actually got funded to do something. Okay. Study of health behaviors in relation to health outcomes. For example, what do prices do? When prices of addictive substances go up, What do people do in response? What are the implications for our understanding of behavior? Do people substitute from alcohol to marijuana? If I raise the price of marijuana, does the consumption of alcohol go up? Okay, those kinds of, and what does that tell us about these two drugs? Okay, molecules may be totally different. They may act on the human body totally differently, but people seem to substitute across them. Okay, what does that mean? So these are some personal examples. But more broadly, I mean, go to any college at MSU, let's say the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, which traditionally has not done a lot of NIH-funded work. Right? But think of what CANR does. It has a heavy focus on the life sciences. Okay? And the life sciences have direct and obvious links to human health. Okay? Most of what they do, I think, can probably be steered or applied to you. So for example, nutrition, somebody here in horticulture? Who's here in horticulture? Horticulture, you're producing crops. Crops provide nutrition, right? You can insert all kinds of nutrients, micronutrients through them and run a study of what different varieties of particular crops do for health outcomes. And I think right there you have a whole slew of potential research projects that the NIH might be interested in funding. Right? So how can I fix a particular micronutrient-caused disorder using a particular strain of whatever it is I want to grow? Pesticides, human-animal health outcomes, right? Toxicology. Insects, malaria, all kinds of vector-borne diseases. Right? Natural resource use, human health outcomes. Okay. So I mean, the list is just endless. And chances are, I think pretty much everybody in this room probably already has an application in mind. But if you don't, you should know that there are probably applications out there that tie very well with your research that could be funded by the NIH. Okay. What are some ingredients for success? I'm mindful, I'm going to use 2 or 3 minutes more and then stop so we can do Q&A. What are some ingredients for success? Based on my experience, preparation and planning, very important. Okay. This is a very long process. Okay. Writing a good grant proposal, it may only be 6 to 12 pages long. Okay. But you really, I mean, that's all the space you have. You have to be very careful about what you include. You're up against some of the best people in the world. Okay. What are you going to do that makes your proposal stand? You've got to be flexible, especially if you're in a non-medical profession. You've got to be willing to tie what you're doing to some kind of health outcome that is of interest to some funding agents, some funding institute within the NIH. Okay? And that will pass scientific muster. Persistence is critical. So the person at the back said, you submitted a proposal, it was not funded, right? One lesson that I learned from a colleague, senior colleague, who's phenomenally successful with NIH funding, is if you don't get it the first time, clean it up and submit it again at least once more. Okay? The good news is in the past, the NIH used to only allow 2 submissions of any particular project proposal, right? So you submit once, you get a reject, or you get funding, which is not very common, right? You get a reject, you clean it up, you submit it again. If you don't get it on the second try, you're done. They're not accepting your proposal again. They have just changed that policy. Okay? They've given it a different name, but de facto what it means is you can take the same proposal and you can submit it, and you can resubmit it, and you can submit it again, and resubmit it again, and keep doing it. Okay? Now you don't want to do that. If you get, if you do this 3 or 4 times and you keep getting the same kinds of low scores, I would recommend that you move on, find something else to do. Because there's something inherently, something systematic about this proposal. But I think it's very important to persist. Okay, so long as you keep improving, keep pushing. And I've seen good proposals. The proposal is written. Colleagues written a proposal, they get back a review, they're disgruntled, they say, forget it, I'm not submitting it again. Okay? That's the worst possible thing. If you don't persist, you're not going to get funded. And the program officer, very, very important. Okay, for a whole variety of reasons. First and foremost, the program officer will give you, in a much more nuanced way than you can perhaps read on the internet, an idea about the priorities of the institute for which they work. Okay? So let me explain something about the people with whom you will interact as you go through the review process. Okay? You'll submit your proposal, it'll go to the Center for Scientific Review. Okay? You'll get to write a cover letter saying, because I'm working with cancer, I would like my proposal to be considered by the National Cancer Institute for funding. Okay? So now your proposal goes in with a cover letter saying National Cancer Institute, and by the way, the proposal is about, let's say, genomics and biostatistics. Okay? So the Center for Scientific Review will receive your proposal with a letter, and it will say, okay, National Cancer Institute, fine. That's where it's going to go for council review for funding. But where are we going to send it for scientific review? And they look at the ingredients of your proposal, right? And if your proposal is genomics and biostatistics, they will find a scientific review group, a study section that has the qualifications in cancer, biostatistics, and genomics. And your proposal will be routed there for review. And chances are that your reviewers will be people who are knowledgeable about these, at least two, if not all three of these disciplines, if they can find. Right? Okay. So, the first step is your proposal goes for scientific review, and the first officer with which your proposal will be associated will be somebody called the Scientific Review Officer, the SRO. Okay? That person organizes the scientific review, organizes the committee, allocates the review of your proposal to 3 preliminary reviewers, to 3 people who are going to read your proposal inside and out. Okay? And evaluate it. And then your proposal will go through review. We'll come to that after I finish with this slide. And then once it's done, right, so it will also be attached to a program officer who will be the representative for that proposal in the institute for the second level of review. Okay. So once your proposal is reviewed scientifically, it will then be sent over with the score to the program officer. Okay. And the program officer will look at the proposal and say, wow, this got a really good score. It's aligned with the priorities of my institute, the National Cancer Institute. I'm going to go to bat for this proposal. So when council review comes along, the program officer will say, great proposal, excellent score, aligned with what we want to do, we need to fund it. Okay? If your proposal is strong, but maybe it's just here or there on the pay line, right, because there are a lot of great proposals that go in, then the word of the program officer becomes probably more important. Right? Because then that's where people start asking questions. Wow, we got all these proposals, they're all around the pay line. Which ones do we fund and which ones don't we fund? Okay? So communication with your program officer to get an idea about what the priorities are of the institute so that they can make the case for your proposal when it comes to council review is extremely important. Okay? The second reason this is extremely important is program officers know a lot more about funding opportunities within the NIH than you will get to know in 1 or 2 hours of surfing the web. You will need much more time than that surfing the internet to find out everything that they know. Okay? And I'll give you my personal example. When I first thought about applying for NIH funding, I wrote a proposal. It was an RO3, which is a small grant because economists use secondary data. We don't need labs and big experiments. And I remember actually going to Washington to meet the program officer and saying, here are my specific aims, right? So here's the 1 page telling you what this proposal is going to be about. I want to write an RO3, right? What do you think? And he looked at it and he said, RO3, here's your problem. You've just come out of graduate school. You have hardly any publications. Your proposal is going to go into the same pot that proposals from people with CVs that are 4 times as long as yours, who have NIH experience, who have like hundreds and thousands of citations. Those are the people that you're going to be up against. There is an investigator category on the evaluation form that you'll see. You're going to get a very weak score there relative to your competition, and you're probably not going to get funded. Okay? So then he said, but we've got a solution for you. We have another program called the B-Start program, which is for newbies like you. Okay? And in that program, so the mechanism is the same. It's an RO3 mechanism, so the funding is the same, everything is the same. The only difference is it is specifically for new people like you. And so what they're going to do is they're going to discount the investigator category. They're going to recognize that everybody in this pool is not going to have a long and full CV. And they're going to let up on that score. And so he said the only thing you need to do is change your cover letter. Don't say RO3, say B-Start. RO3. That's all I did. I tweaked the letter, sent it in. That was my first one. Okay. So this would not have happened if I had not met the program officer. It was a very simple bit of information. It's public information. The NIH advertises this. But it's such a big and complex organization that very often the best way to find out what's going to help you the most is to go to a program officer. Okay. The other nice thing is program officers are scientists like you. They want to help you. The NIH wants people, the NIH wants good ideas, the NIH wants to fund good ideas. Its mission is to improve the public health. Okay. So almost invariably you'll find program officers are your allies. They want to work with you. They want you to write the best science. It makes everybody look good. Okay. So what I'll do next is, let's talk about the handout. So what you all should have is a copy of this review handout. Does everybody have this? So let me tell you a little about, how many of you have seen this before? Okay. This is the most important thing, okay? This, if you intend to apply for NIH funding, hang on to this, memorize it, get it into your bones, whatever it is, okay? Because this is what your reviewers are going to fill out. And this is what is going to determine your overall impact score and ultimately whether or not you get funded. Okay? Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about this review form. As you'll see, this review form is for RPGs. These are RPGs, research project grants, right, for research. Is anybody here for anything other than an RPG, a research project? I don't think so, right? When you introduce yourselves, everybody's here for research. Okay? So let me tell you a little bit about some of these mechanisms. The three ones that I'm going to focus on, I have reviewed for the other mechanisms, but I'll focus on the R01, the R03, and the R21. Because these are the standard research projects that the NIH funds. Okay? So what are the differences in these mechanisms? The R03 is also known as the small grant. Okay? Usually it involves awards of up to $50,000 a year for up to 2 years in direct costs. Okay? So this is a total of $100,000 and you've got to finish your project in 2 years. This is usually intended for the analysis of secondary data, which is one reason I've had R03 funding. As an economist, you download the data and you analyze it, right? Maybe you have a graduate student assistant working with you. Okay? Small, usually secondary data, or maybe small projects, pilot type projects. Okay? The R21 is a little bit larger. It's still designed for a 2-year project. Okay? It's called the Exploratory Developmental project. Okay? This can be funded up to $275,000 over 2 years with a cap of $200,000 for any 1 year. Okay? It's called an Exploratory Developmental project because the understanding when reviewers look at this is going to be a highly innovative project. It's a great idea. It's unproven. But it has the potential to really advance public health. Okay? Because it's unproven, we don't need to see results from pilot studies demonstrating proof of concept or anything. We'll come in without pilot studies. Just come in with a really good idea. Now de facto, if there are two proposals, one is really innovative but doesn't have some pilot data motivating it, another one's innovative and has a little bit of pilot data, obviously the one with a little bit of pilot data will fare better. Okay. But at least, by definition, you're not required to have pilot data for this project. If you're really innovative, you can still get a really good score. Okay? And then the flagship research, go ahead.
So, do all the institutes hold these 3 types of grants?
I believe all the institutes award funding for all of these. Okay? Yeah. These are the standard grants. Yeah. You might find an exception here or there, but I think you can go away with the assumption that they all do. I think even the National Library of Medicine has R01s, R21s, and R03s. Yeah. So I think everybody has. Okay. All right. And then there's the R01, which is the flagship grant. And the standard award is capped at $500,000 for up to 5 years. Okay? And these are the big projects. If you're going to go for an R01, you better have a really strong track record of publishing in your field, have a really strong team, we'll go into all of that, but you really need to have some pilot data motivating it. People look for it. Where's the pilot study saying that this has a lot of promise, and therefore you can go ahead and do a full study. Okay? Alright. Let me talk a little bit about the scored review criteria now, and also scoring more generally. Okay? So the way it works is, for a reviewer, at some point you get an email from a scientific review officer saying, we invite you to be on this review panel, right? And then you accept, or you say, I'm really busy, or whatever. Usually I accept. Okay? And then what they do is, after a few days, they'll send you another email saying, okay, we've put the proposals that you're going to be reviewing up on this secure internet website. How many of you have an ID on the NIH ERA Commons already? Okay? So basically the proposals that have been assigned to you will appear on ERA Commons in an IAR, an Internet Assisted Review section. Okay? And you'll click on that Internet Reviews, the IAR tab, and you'll see a list of proposals in front of you. Okay? And what you're going to be required to do then as a reviewer is read each of those proposals. It takes a lot of time to read, and I'll talk about that too. And then, as a reviewer, you are required to score the proposal on each of the 5 criteria that are listed here. Significance, investigators, innovation, approach, and environment. Okay? Let me tell you a little bit about what these mean. Significance has 2 components to it. Okay? Is your work going to advance the science in this area? Are you going to add to the existing base of knowledge? Number 1. And 2, is the problem that you're looking at significant in some sense? Okay? If there's only one person in the world and being affected by this thing, and they happen to be outside the United States, it's a federal funding agency, you probably have less of a shot at scoring high on significance than if you're dealing with smoking, which is associated with over 400,000 deaths in the United States every year. Okay? So think about that for significance. How much are you going to advance the science, and how important is this problem? Okay? Investigators, they're going to look at your CV. Okay, you're required to fill a bio-sketch on a particular format for the NIH. They're going to look at your bio-sketch. And what I do, and I think what everybody else does, is we look at the proposal, we say, this involves genomics, biostatistics, and knowledge of this particular aspect of cancer. I want to see bio-sketches that cover those, either in one bio-sketch or multiple ones. Okay? Go ahead.
Actually, when you're filling out your bio-sketch, there's a personal statement, and for every time you're applying for different NIH projects, that personal statement becomes very important. You have to tweak that to fit in,
Yeah.
A lot of people don't do it. They do their biosketch once and they don't tweak it. And
that's right. If you write so your biosketch consists of 2 things. One is a personal statement, and then the other is your history, which includes publications. You're limited to 15 publications. So usually 5 of which are most relevant to the project, and then another 10 if you want to do it that way, but a lot of people don't. Prior NIH funding is another thing that you want to list, especially recent funding, because that does influence reviewers. Okay? If you already have experience managing an NIH project, well, that gives reviewers confidence that you're going to be able to manage this project. For those of you who are relatively new, you may want to have somebody else on there who has experience as a consultant, or with a complementary area of expertise that's related to your project, right? Put that bio-sketch on, people will give you a pass if you don't have NIH funding, right? Okay, he doesn't, but he's new, but guess what? He's got this person who's working with him and will act as a mentor and help him out with implementing the project. Okay. All right, so that's investigators, and please, if you have questions, I'll answer them at the end of this. Innovation, very important. What's new? Okay? And one thing that I've noticed in generally is, if a proposal is innovative, right? If it really has that spark, wow, this is really new. This could be a game changer. That can really influence reviewers, and reviewers might even say, this is so innovative that even though there's a little bit of a blemish here or there in some other aspect of the proposal, this kind of carries the day. Okay? And that can happen across sections. If you really impress with a particular dimension, right? Sometimes a reviewer may say, wow, this is so good. I haven't seen something like this in who knows how many years. This is great. Let's try and advance it. Okay? Approach, very important section. Okay? The science has to be robust. Okay? If you're going to look at the impact of some kind of intervention on a population, you want a randomized control trial, right? If you say, I'm going to sort of just go off and catch the first 10 people and do some kind of analysis, not going to work. Okay? Are your sample sizes appropriate, given some kind of power analysis? It's a standard part of most R01 proposals now. Okay? Your N needs to be big enough. Right? Have you stratified appropriately? What statistical methods are you using? Have you thought about clustering effects? All kinds of things. I'm only talking about stats because I happen to work on and enjoy it. But I mean, think about what you're doing, bench science, what are the standard questions people ask? Every I needs to be dotted and every T needs to be crossed. Okay? The Achilles heel of most proposals is the approach section. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture that captures this. Look at this picture. Right? So these are the scores. So remember, scores for each of these sections also. For each of these 5 categories, we score each proposal on a scale of 1 to 9. Right? The median score for approach, 4.7. This is the Achilles heel of most proposals. Okay? People are generally very kind on environment and investigator. Okay? People don't want to kind of get too personal. And generally speaking, if you're going to apply for a statistics grant, either you or somebody else whose biosketch in there is going to reflect statistical knowledge. Right? So you're going to get a good score. This is very easy to do. This is easy to do. Are you at a good university? Yeah, I'm at MSU, I've got a computer, I've got a lab, I've got whatever I need to do the research. 2. 3. Okay? So these are easy, these are gimmies. The really hard one is approach. Okay, get it right, get the science right. The next hard one is innovation. And innovation and significance sometimes go hand in hand. If I'm not innovative, I'm doing the same old thing, well, significance is going to be low. I'm not going to advance science. Right? You'll find there's actually a correlation between these two. But innovation proposals do get hit on innovations. People have done factor analyses of these as well. How many of you know factor analysis? Okay, so for those of you who know, people have done factor analyses of these. The first factor that explains 72% of the variation in scores is most heavily loaded on approach and innovation. Get those right, and you're well on your way to getting funded. All right. So, and then there's environment, MSU. Good research university, good facilities, support. I've got the closet with a lock on it where I can put away the confidential data that will be separated from the names of the subjects, which will be in another cupboard. Got some kind of post-award support, all of that. Okay. Protections for human subjects is also a review criterion, and it can affect the score. So even though the 5 criteria, these first 5, I'll get to you in just a moment, right? These additional review criteria are also scoreable. Okay. Make sure that there's a lock on the cupboard where you're putting your data if you've got paper data. Make sure that the names are separated from the data and you have a separate key that's sitting in another location. Those kinds of things. Protect the confidentiality. Right? Or whatever else, if there are other issues with human subjects, make sure that you've covered them. Okay. Make sure that the sex, gender composition of your samples, if you're working with humans, race, ethnicity, etc., is scientifically justifiable. Okay. Usually a population representative sample works. If you're doing something with kids, population representative of people within that age group. Okay. Alright. Vertebrate animals, biohazards, resubmission renewal I'm going to stay away from because I'm already way over the time that I planned. Let me take a look at a couple of other slides here. Let's see. Yeah, I think I'll leave these. But you see the correlation between the approach score and the overall impact score? Fairly strong, right? The next highest in the graphs I saw were innovation on overall impact score. These are the two, I think these are the 2 areas where most proposals, if they are going to slip, most proposals will slip in these 2. Let me explain a couple of other things. So, So now how does the review happen? Right? Each proposal pops up on the internet for the reviewer. There are 3 assigned reviewers, initial reviewers for each proposal. Okay? We review these proposals at home, in the office, wherever we are. Right? And each of us is asked to assign after looking at these 5 different categories, so we give each of the 5 categories a score. And then on the basis of that, we assign an overall impact score, which also ranges between 1 and 9. No decimals allowed, only integers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? That overall impact score gets posted on the internet. Okay? After the evaluation period ends. Okay? And so now what do we have? Each proposal has 3 scores from 3 different reviewers from all over the country. Right? What the scientific review officer is then going to do is they're going to take those 3 scores and average them. Okay? So let's say your proposal got a 2 from reviewer 1, a 5 from reviewer 2, and a 2 from reviewer 3. 2 plus 5 plus 2 is 9, divided by 3 is 3. Your average overall impact score is 3. Okay? That average is going to be computed for each of the 100 or 50 or 200 or whatever it is applications that are going to this particular reviewer group. Okay. After those average scores are calculated, the scientific review officer is going to sort those proposals by score. Right? With the best scoring applications at the top and the worst scoring applications at the bottom. And then, and I'm giving you sort of a kind of a broad brush idea about what happens. They're going to draw a line through the middle. Right? The proposals that are below the middle are not going to be discussed. Okay? The review process ends there. The summaries that we are required to post on the internet will be edited by the scientific review officer, and you will get a summary statement a few months later. A few weeks after the review, which I'll come to, the in-person review. Get a summary statement saying, here's what happened, not discussed, not scored, here are the comments. Okay. The proposals that are in the top half, that get the good scores, will end up being discussed. So here's what happens. After we post our reviews on the internet, a few weeks later, we get invited to Washington or wherever a review meeting is happening, an in-person review meeting. 30 people, 20 people, whatever, sitting in a room. Okay. I'm going to one in San Francisco, actually, on Sunday night. Monday, Tuesday, I'll be sitting in a room with 20 or 30 other colleagues from all over the country. Okay? And the top half of the proposals that we reviewed for our standing committee, right, will be discussed in order of score. Okay? And during the review session, what happens is the scientific review officer will ask each of the 3 reviewers who read and wrote the reviews and posted them online, right, to make a statement about the proposal and what they viewed as the strengths and weaknesses of the proposal. Okay. After the 3 people reviewed, it takes roughly 10 minutes. Right? Then the discussion is open to the other 25, 30 people who are in the room who may not have read the proposal that closely because they had another 10 proposals to review of their own. Right? In that pool. Okay. Discussion happens, it's vetted. Well, is this really a legitimate concern? You had a concern that I didn't have, and I had another concern. Now we've got 2 concerns we're dealing with. What do we do with the score of the proposal? Okay? After another 2-3 minutes of discussion, right, the 3 reviewers who originally reviewed the proposal are asked to put in their final scores. They can stand pat, give it the score that they gave it earlier, or they can move based on what they've heard. Either better or worse. Usually it's worse. Because other people find things, given their expertise, that you didn't see because you had different expertise. Okay. But sometimes it's better. I've seen it happen. There's hope. Okay. And then you post, so you announce your final scores, the 3 reviewers. And then everybody else in the room gets to put a score in. Usually that score is within the range of final scores that the reviewers proposed. If it's not, so I can decide, you know what, you said it was a 2, you said it was a 5, you said it's a 2, I think it's a 7. In that case, I have to identify myself, and if the reasons for my doing the 7 have not been discussed, I need to state them. And then I can put my 7 down. Okay. Now, there are 26 scores for your proposal. Those 26 scores are averaged. That's the final overall impact score. That's the one that goes into a distribution. That's the one that determines the percentile that is sent up to the council, and and on the basis of which a funding decision is made, in addition to the criteria for the institute. So that's how the review process works. It's an incredibly thorough process, very thorough process. There may be a little mistake here or there, but generally speaking, the good stuff, the cream rises to the top and gets funded. All right, so now let me stop and let's take individual. We still have plenty of time, so any individual questions? Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to ask one about the review criteria. So you mentioned, innovation and significance, and that they're related and sort of correlate with each other. And I just wondered if you could explain a little bit more about what distinguishes them from each other, because for both it sounds like what is new about this idea kind of.
I can have a highly innovative project that doesn't contribute much to public health, for example. I can have a highly innovative project that may not advance science in an important way. Happens. But generally speaking, if it's highly innovative in a good way. Right? So they correlate, but obviously they aren't perfectly correlated. Significance, the other thing that colors significance is how important is the health problem. I could do the most innovative thing in the world and have an impact on one person's health, or a slightly less innovative thing that has an impact on 1 million people's health. Right? So you can see there are different dimensions that are captured by these two things, but they do correlate. And I'm sure if somebody were to run correlations between among the 5 categories, you'd see some sort of overall correlations. That's the way it works, right? I mean, there'll be some, I'm impressed by this proposal, and that kind of affects how you score all the 5 categories. That can also happen. But I can assure you the NIH has probably done a lot of factor analysis as well, in coming up with these categories. They've been doing this for a long time, and they do modify, I see things from the outside, right, as an MSU faculty member. I see what modifications they go through, and even if you don't know exactly what happened, behind the closed doors, the modifications strike me when they happen as being very thoughtful ones. Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, I'm just wondering, are there insider rubrics for each of the criteria that will go to reviewers, or they will just grade on these 5 criteria based on however they understand significance?
Right. So 2 points here. So first of all, this is something I really want to impress upon everybody. There's a lot of information on the web about these review criteria. So the Center for Scientific Review and a number of agencies in the NIH, most of what I've told you is on the web in some way, shape or form. It'll probably take you more than an hour to get to all of it, probably way more. But if you go on the internet, they'll actually tell you, in fact, what is the page? There's one page that actually goes into this in an enormous amount of detail. I think it's on the CSR site. But you can go in and you can look at how they define significance. And reviewers, especially reviewers who have done this a lot, I mean, we have it like it's memorized. We know what we're looking for, and we do it on the basis of our interpretation of what the NIH says. And the nice thing is, pretty much everybody who's reviewing interprets it the way the NIH says it and in the same way. And to me, the indication for this is every time I post a score on the Internet Assisted Review site, so you can only view other reviewers' scores after a certain deadline for posting the score. So I post my score before the deadline, and then once the deadline's passed, I can go back and see what the 2 other reviewers did. And there's an incredible amount of concordance in scoring. So it's very rare for the range to be more than a couple of points. Very rare. Those are the ones where the discussion happens. That's why, I noticed this because I'm a specialist in this, and you're not. That's why you thought it was not that good, and I thought it was great. Generally, they're very, it'll be a 3-4-4. 2-1-3. Not much variation.
You focused on RO1s, RO3s, and I forget the third one. 21s. But I was wondering, are early career investigator grants also scored in exactly the same fashion?
I think there's one difference, and that is your plan. You have a career plan. You're required to write a statement. So the review template is slightly different. Now here's the good news. All these review templates, this is all public information. You can go onto the internet and download this. And if you're going to write a proposal, and you know what mechanism you're writing for, download this. You must download it. Look at the review criteria and write for the reviewers. Okay. Couple of other things. For the standing review committee, I usually get 9 or 10 proposals. Each one of them takes a couple of hours. Right? Between the time you start reading it and you fill the form and you post it online and all that, it takes a couple of hours. It's a lot of time, a lot of concentration. Okay? Make it easy for the reviewer. Okay? Show them, guide them to where, show them where the innovation is. In bold font. Innovation. You want to score my proposal on innovation? Here it is. This is why I think it's innovative. Approach. Significance. Make it easy. Look at the template. Write to the template. Okay? Because if you make it easy, people get happy. If it's all garbled up, chances are people will miss things. There are a lot of good proposals which have everything they should have. Sometimes, you find that a reviewer says, blah. By the way, you missed this. It was on this page, this page. Okay, I missed it. Okay, I'm going to remember. Make it easy, make it obvious, especially the scoring points. Go ahead.
May I revisit the question
Yes.
that I sort of implicitly asked earlier?
Yeah.
May I just give a little anecdote?
Sure.
Recent submission to a bioengineering, that was a year and a half ago, called the Institute. It's called Bioengineering.
Right.
And scientific review came back. There were 2 people on the scientific panel called professors of engineering.
Right.
Review came back with one engineer review, which was reasonable. The other was an MD that just said, this was breast cancer screening using microwave. Very innovative project.
Right.
People in Shanghai, lots of patient data, couldn't get in the United States, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
MDs involved, but Chinese MDs.
Right.
Review came back, what kind of cells and what kind of this and that, and the engineering was completely lost in the review.
Right.
And it wasn't scored. And I thought maybe, 30 years ago I expected this, 25 years ago SBIRs were okay, 10 years ago it looked like there was some hope,
Right.
now it looks like the MDs are back.
The majority of the people I work with are PhDs. Now it may have to do with the nature of the study section that I'm on, right? So community level health promotion is about promoting health in communities, right? Yeah, there are MDs, but mostly PhDs. They're people who study education or nutrition or things like psychology, things like that, right? So a couple of suggestions. So number one is the obvious one, right? Whenever you get a bad review, you ask the question, is it my project that has some flaws, or is it the way I'm communicating it to a particular type of person, in this case maybe an MD, right? So that's the first question. The second question is, if you feel you've communicated it right for all audiences, so clearly the engineers understood what was going on, but maybe it was written in their language to the point that the MD read it and just switched off and said, I can't handle this. So it may very well be that they kind of zoned out at some point because it was a different world. But that also suggests, these are health professionals, and you have to convince health professionals too that this is something that's worth doing. So that's one possibility. Another is there is an element of idiosyncrasy in the review process in that you're going to get 3 reviewers, right? And there's a chance that one of the reviewers may come from an angle that you didn't anticipate. Okay, I'll give you an example of a proposal I wrote. It was about a medical device, right? And it had to do with a particular type of medication. And my interest is in the area of the medication, but not necessarily in the area of the device. So we wrote the proposal, and I always had this sense that this proposal is going to end up with the people who are interested in the kind of medication and the health problem, right? But it actually ended up going to a review panel that had a bunch of device and engineering people. And so the review that we got was clearly done by people who were into devices and stuff. and who said, you know what, who implicitly said, yeah, we get the idea about the health thing, but there's this metal, what, things are you using, what are their properties, this, that, and the other, which we hadn't anticipated, right? So then what did we do? We went back, we cleaned it up. And we said, we got to write this in a different language, a language that works for the substantive people, but also works for the engineers. And so we're going to put in microns, and we're going to talk about alloys, and we're going to talk about all of that stuff that interests them, and then send it back. And then put a note in the cover letter saying, it was reviewed by this panel, it emphasized this other aspect. We want to emphasize to you that this proposal contains both these pieces of knowledge. And if you can put together reviewers who capture both areas of expertise, I think then this will get a good sort of at least a fair review, right? And the scientific review officers have a lot of leeway. So even though the panel that they work with may be just engineers, if you put a request like that in, they can pull somebody in from the outside to look at it from the substantive angle as well. And they can weigh in on behalf of the substantive side. So there's a lot of flexibility that way, and it happens all the time. In fact, most of my ad hoc reviews are just that. I get pulled in for two proposals on this panel. Because I happen to work in an area that the panel doesn't generally represent, but they need an economist or something like that. Okay, and then there's the other one. Are you familiar with the CSR website and all the different study groups and review groups? You can actually go in and look at what they do and identify a study group that has expertise that you feel best matches what you're working on. Request that in your cover letter. So I think that's another important thing.
The message that we got back was don't submit this again unless you have a team of oncologists who are interested in cancer and this process of the genesis of cancer,
right,
types of cancer, and we're engineers.
So add an oncologist. We got a whole bunch sitting in CHN.
Sure, but that adds hundreds of thousands of dollars to the project.
Not necessarily. Add them as a consultant. I mean, how many hours of their time do you need? Add them as a consultant.
We have oncologists in Shanghai. That doesn't count.
I don't know, honestly. I'd have to look at the reviews. But I would think if the criticism was you don't have an oncologist, the response is, I'm going to get an oncologist. And when I submit my resubmission, my introduction page, you get to write a page introducing, explaining what you did to your proposal. Thank you for your reviews. We have added an oncologist to the team. And the bio sketch is there. It's got oncology all over it. But resubmit. Don't stop. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that our office has, we've added 3 new people to our staff. These are all NIH experts. VPRGS has got, so they, what they will be doing is they will be providing consultation to faculty. They won't, do any writing help, but they will, look at your proposal and help you with your editing and, give you suggestions on your specific aims, etc., whether, everything is okay and something, services like that. So please contact VPRGS office. We've added 3 new staff who are looking at that. And there is a flyer. Meg Bouvier is coming next week for that. So I think everyone has to register. It is by RSVP. And there is a cutoff. So if you would like, some suggestions from her, you could register for it.
Let me come back to the investigator thing. It's one of the easiest categories because I think you probably got downscored on investigators if you didn't have oncologists. Really? Okay, well that's good. That's not an issue.
Basically, the message was you're not an oncologist, you can't do cancer research.
Get an oncologist.
And this is what I expected over the years at NIH, but I thought there was a new error when I saw bioengineers.
But you know, generally speaking, I'll say this from an economist perspective. Research teams that have good qualified economists generally tend to have proposals that are stronger on the economics when they propose to do economics. When there is not an economist on a team and there is some kind of proposal to do economics, very often some basic rookie there are rookie mistakes. You see rookie mistakes. And as an economist, you know, if I'm called in as an economist, that's what I'm looking for. I'm going to go straight to the economics section. A lot of it is nuts and bolts stuff, but the economists know what nuts and bolts need to be there. And sometimes other people do, sometimes they don't.
What's the average size of a research team on these grants?
It totally varies. And I think that's something that you should determine based on the skill sets that you need to successfully complete your project. I mean, if you don't need, because you can, you know, people will look at a proposal and say, why do you have 3 economists? So why do you have 3 people who do blah and all, you know, 3 biostatisticians when all you need is 1, right? On the other hand, if you need a biostatistician and an oncologist and a geneticist and blah, you need to have that either in one biosketch, which is impossible these days, or, you know, with 3 or 4 different biosketches. But, you know, with the investigators, it's almost formulaic, right? You're looking for a good active publication record. Somebody in there with experience doing NIH-funded research, knows how to run the project and all the federal guidelines and all of that. And then all the skill sets that are required to complete the research. If you have that, you got the people power that you need for your project.
As far as I know, every proposal will be discussion. So you determine that.
Pardon?
So when your panel, your satisfaction discussing the proposal, what determines it go to the discussion or not?
Oh, in your score. So the preliminary review, when 3 scores go up, the average is taken. So let's say there are 100 proposals, and 50 of them have scores above 4.7, average scores for the 3 initial reviewers, and the other 50 are below 4.7. The 50 proposals that are below 4.7 do not get discussed. So what it means is if you get a summary statement that says not discussed, typically it means your proposal was below the median.
But I submitted a proposal a few years ago. The average of my score is 2.9.
Right.
So it's not bad.
Not bad. 2.9 is great.
It was not discussed.
Okay, so let me give you a couple of other reasons why it may not have been discussed.
I look at the comment size and the result and say it does not have direct connection.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of other reasons why I made it. So when I said this is a broad brush idea of what goes on, what really happens is the following. Sorry? So here's what really happens. When your proposal goes in, you are categorized as an experienced investigator if you've already had an R01 grant before, or as a new investigator or an early stage investigator. They're different categories. Okay? So your proposals actually go into different groups. And then the preliminary scores are averaged. And what they really do is they draw that median line separately for the experienced investigator group, separately for the new and early stage investigator group. Okay? And as you can imagine, experienced investigators tend to write better proposals. So my guess is that that median line that separates discussed from not discussed for the experienced investigators is much higher than the line for new or early stage investigators. That's one possibility. Alright. The other possibility is that your proposal may have gone into a group of reviewers who are generally scoring proposals very high. So it may very well have been the case that, and sometimes grade inflation happens. It happens everywhere. So it may very well be that the median was above 2.9, it was 2.8 or something. Okay. Now let me say one other thing about proposals that go below the median line. Reviewers have the option. So let's say I scored a proposal 2 and the two other reviewers scored it an 8. So the average score is really not very good. But I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. Right? You do have the option as a reviewer to rescue a proposal. So I can say, look, I recognize that this proposal is below the median line, okay? But I thought it was a great proposal. And I want to know why the two of you thought it was not so great. And if we do that, if we rescue a proposal, it gets discussed. But that very rarely happens to a 288, right? You can imagine, that's probably way down at the bottom. It will usually happen to a proposal that's just 1 or 2 over the line. And even that, sometimes it happens and sometimes it all depends on what the reviewers think. Go ahead.
You know, my experience in serving on NSF channels has been when there is such a wide variation in scores, you know, the program officers, when you do discuss, you know, those type of cases.
It depends. So if it's a 288,
yeah,
I'm guessing it's not going to be discussed.
Well, I mean, you know, because they raise that question.
Yeah.
I have seen on the panels is that why is there, you know, such a variation?
So that happens. So you know, a proposal. So let's think about 2 proposals. One gets a 333, average 3, right? The other one gets a 117, average is still 3, right? The 333 suggests some concordance, right, in the overall sort of impact that the 3 reviews gave it. Those discussions tend to be, but not always, because if I saw something different from somebody else, then, you know, all bets are off. But those discussions tend to be very short. So we all agree this is a decent proposal. Here are the strengths. Reviewer 1 says, here are the strengths, here are the weaknesses. Reviewer 2 says, I have nothing to add. You've covered everything I had to say. Reviewer 3 says, same here, done. Final score, 3, 3, 3, done. Okay? But if it's 1, 1 and 7, then you can be pretty sure that the 7 and the 1s are going to have a discussion, perhaps even a debate. And they're going to try and converge, but the convergence doesn't always happen. Sometimes you can agree as scientists from different disciplines to disagree.
There is a discussion, I've seen that happen.
For a 117, there'll be a pretty vigorous discussion, usually. Go ahead.
So the small business innovation research, that's not how this
No, so the small business, are you talking about SBIR or STTR? Which one?
SBIR.
Okay, so SBIRs are the R43, R44s.
So why would MSU discuss that?
Well, SBIRs not so much unless MSU, there may be MSU faculty who set up a small business outside campus to commercialize their research. Maybe through MSU Business Connect, or I forget what the name is, but MSU Technology, right?
Mm-hmm. We're actually hosting a seminar at our Holland Bioeconomy Institute.
Okay. And that's the panel I just came off, was an SBIR, STTR review. So let me explain a couple of things. The SBIR is a small business innovation research grant. So that's a business that is heavily private. Okay. The PI has to be at least 50% employed by that business, and therefore cannot be more than 49% faculty at MSU. Right? The STTR is a little bit different. It's also about innovation research, but there the involvement of the university can be much stronger. STTR. And one of the things that MSU is trying to do is to take inventions from the university to market through these channels. And if you're interested in that, if you have a good idea that you think may be commercializable, I would highly recommend that you get in touch with MSU Technology. A couple of things about these grants. They, in terms of overall impact scores, my sense is the success rates tend to be higher. I think generally the science community views them as being easier to get by way of funding. But you know, if you're a full-time faculty member or employee of MSU, you're automatically disqualified from doing an SBIR because you're less than 50% in the small business. And I'm not sure exactly what the rules are for STTR because I don't have that much experience with them. but there may be some requirements there as well. But I highly recommend it because I think it's a growing area. A lot of people are paying attention to it, and I think MSU is particularly keen on getting into that space.
Very good.
I've had 3 SBRs. I've never had my own company or anything. It's just a matter of working with another company.
Yeah, you can do that. So who was the PI?
Well, it always has to be someone.
It has to be somebody who's employed by that company.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the key thing.
It's student money and things like that.
Sure. Sure. Go ahead.
Am I still eligible for the start the young investigator if I have co-PIs that are not, that are more experienced, or?
Well, so when I got my B start, one of the criticisms at that time I had no clue about writing NIH proposals, right? So the program officer advised me, said, look, you're inexperienced, you need somebody in the field to be your mentor. I was at the University of Pittsburgh in those days, Carnegie Mellon's right across the river. Went across, expert in my area, I said, would you be willing to mentor me? Sure. Added in, move forward.
So you still apply to that mechanism with eStart?
Yeah, I was the PI, he was a consultant.
Right.
So what you would probably want to do is you want to be the PI. Because what is the aim? The B start, I'll tell you where the B start's coming from. The NIH is concerned that over time, and I believe, is it Sally Rocky? What's her name? She came here 2 years ago. So she made a presentation. This is an NIH officer, very well known. In fact, write down Rock Talk, ROCKTALK. Google it up. This is a newsletter that comes out from Sally Rocky's office at the NIH. This is about NIH review and how to get grants and tips and all that good stuff. Get onto that mailer. But she emphasized this when she came in. She said the NIH is very interested, obviously, in continuing to renew generations of health researchers, right? And what they noticed statistically is the average age and the median age of people getting their first R01 grant was getting older and older. I think at this point it's something like 45 years old. Your first R01 comes when you're 45, if you're a median researcher, right? So one of the things they are keen on doing is trying to get younger researchers into being PIs of NIH proposals early in their careers. Okay? This is why they have the new investigator category, the early stage investigator category, with different standards for whether or not your proposal is discussed, and then also different standards for pay lines. Okay? So where an experienced investigator may have to be within the 10th percentile to get awarded, for an ESI or a new investigator, maybe 12 is fine. Right? So you get these little benefits. The important thing for you would be to go in as PI and name these people who will mentor you as co-investigators. And I would think that having co-investigators who are experienced with NIH experience as mentors will greatly strengthen the proposal. There's no question about it.
To be considered in that early stage, as long as you have your profile in Era Commons, is that enough, or you have to put in your cover letter, or how does that work? How do they know that you're an early investigator?
I think they automatically know it because they have a database. But I think on your application form you get to check these boxes as well. You may want to check the format of the cover page or whatever it is. But so here's how they determine it. Technically you're a new investigator if you've never had an R01 before. You automatically get that break. I think you get an additional break. I don't know whether it's additional or whether it replaces the new investigator, what it is. But if you're within X years, and I think is the X 7 or 10 years? 10 years of getting a terminal degree, then you get the early stage investigator. And I don't know if these two benefits are additive or they replace, or there's, the whole is a little less than the sum of the parts.
It will be, if you go for the early career award page, they will give you the criteria, how long you have to be, within the client.
But early career awards are slightly different. So the definition may be the same as the definition for early stage investigator. So early stage investigator applies to applications for an R01. The early career award is a K award. But it may be that 10 years is the criterion for both, I don't know, for eligibility. That's the K, is it the K00? What do they call it? K something.
So then people also might be eligible, I mean, people don't explore. NSF has early career awards. The Department of Defense has actually tons of things which MSU faculty are not really tapping into. So
well, the DoD,
and a lot of
the DoD has a slightly different review process.
It does, but they also fund a lot of medical projects, and you see a lot of funding which is coming out of the DoD is health related specifically.
There are a lot of announcements that come out.
That might be something from an engineering point of view.
That money's all hardwired. You can't get into dark mode.
I didn't say it.
I know you did. I did.
One of the things I like about the NSF is it is about as transparent as it gets, and it's all on the web. If you want to know how it's reviewed, how everything's done, it's all on the web.
And actually, one of the NSF is promoting this year and in the coming years anything to do with the brain, how you can approach. And I heard autism was one of the, somebody mentioned autism. So autism is definitely something to do with developmental, so brain, so they might be able to apply for NSF funding also. So anybody who is in neuroscience or genetics or anything, they're looking at different angles of brain research. So
does your proposal have to be associated with one of the institutes, or can you have something that's like crossing a few?
Crossing is sometimes a good thing, right? And it's a good thing because then you can look at success rates. So then you have potentially two. So remember I said you should meet a program officer. Always make contact with the program officer before you submit your proposal. Okay? A key part of your proposal is the specific aims, right? Specifically, what are you going to do, right? Ideally, what you want to do is before you submit your proposal, long before you submit your proposal, before you even write it, write down the specific aims. Identify a program officer or two or three at the NIH who are in areas that might be the areas that end up funding, in institutes that might end up funding what you want to do, and send them the specific aims and ask them, what do you think? Does this align well with your mission, with what you're funding and all of that, okay? Now, if your proposal is on, let's say, obesity among children, right? But obesity is associated with all kinds of health conditions, right? But it's also a childhood problem in this particular case. So there's the NICHD, which is the National Institute of Child Health and Development, and then there'll be institutes that deal with obesity-related health outcomes as well. So if you think that you want to work in that, or if you're working on cigarette smoking, well, there's the National Institute on Drug Abuse, which deals with addictive substances, and there's the National Cancer Institute, right? So smoking causes cancer, right? So in these instances, it's actually a very good thing because you can now think about which of the institutes am I going to send my proposal to. And that will depend on a variety of factors. It will depend, if I were doing it, I would look at the enthusiasm with which program officers in the two institutes receive my specific aims. And if one says, this is great, I want it, right? You know where to send it. And the other one is like, you know what, we don't work in this area, whatever. Okay? That's one. The second thing you may want to look at is success rates. Just look at the hard statistics, right? Who's getting, who's awarding only up to the 5th percentile and who's awarding to the 15th percentile. So that'll give you an idea of the supply, right, of funding, if you can legitimately send to more than one institute. So I would put all of these factors together and then make some kind of a decision about, okay, looks like this is where it's going to work best.
And also please remember that we fund faculty to go to Washington DC, but on a cost-share basis. So if you're a college and your department funds 2/3, we will fund, our office will fund 1/3 to meet with program officers.
Any other questions?
Very good.
Remember this slide. If you can ace the approach, the innovation.
Very good, thank you.